We live in a fantasy world now. Reality has been destroyed.
This is the time that we really need to pay attention.
The probabilities are overwhelmingly on gold's side. That is the best environment to see gold increase its value.
Welcome to Palisades Gold Radio. I'm your host, Tom Bodrovics. Joining me today is Robert Smallbone from the Contrarian Capitalist Substack. Rob, thanks for joining me today.
Tom, thanks for having me on. I just want to say it's an honor to join the pantheon of wonderful guests that you've had on the show. So I'm glad to be on that ring of honor.
Well, I appreciate it as well. And, I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. And I think a good place to kind of start this today is by talking a little bit about, yourself obviously being from the UK. What are some of the, let's say, worrying signs that you're seeing right now? And what is that kind of leading you to or motivating you to do about it?
Just get chucked in at the deep end. I love it. Where do you start with what's going on in the UK at the moment? So it's, if I'm okay to use profanity, because I can be a bit of a potty mouth, it's a bit of a shit show at the moment, Tom. It really is. There is, I think, a lot of double standards. That probably applies to quite a lot of the world, to be fair. So I don't want to make us sound like we're a complete basket case. But we've seen in the last few weeks, there's been various riots and disturbances. And then we have either it's the Metropolitan Police or the government come out and almost look to start suppressing free speech with turning up at people's doors because they've said something deemed, offensive. And for the benefit of the podcast, I'll do the old bunny ears on that, offensive on X or something like that. And people who are being labelled as right-wingers or fascists, getting in trouble for inciting violence. And yet at the same time, if you are more predominantly left-wing, it doesn't seem to be happening at the moment. So, yeah, it's dangerous. Governments come in. So for anyone not familiar with UK politics, we've had 12 to 15 years of Conservative or Tory rule, but they haven't really done a good job. Not going to lie, they've come away from their true values. The world and his wife could probably see that we were going to swing to the left anyway, because normally that's how it works. Keir Starmer, or Sir Keir Starmer, I should say, he didn't even have to do much on. I think I could have been Prime Minister, to be fair. All you had to do is turn up, say a few things, not get yourself in trouble, because I think people had such enough of the Tory side, the right side. And then, we ended up with a swing on the left, despite the fact, only 1 in 5 people, give or take, actually voted them in with the first past the post system. We've ended up with a Labour majority. And they're pretty much able to put their stamp on it. Going back to riots, not good. That could lead us anywhere. It's not good. It's not healthy. But I think the thing that isn't healthy about it is people being able to either take responsibility or accountability for what's led us to that situation in the first place. What am I doing about it? Well, I think that it's important more so than ever to get yourself out of the financial system as much as possible and as best as possible. Now, I'm not going to claim to know everything I need to know about something like Bitcoin, so I'm not going to pass comment on that, but I understand that there are some merits there that people might want to look to. I'm a bullion man myself, to be perfectly honest. I also got a property company or a real estate company, as your North American listeners will want to know. So, got that in the background with business partner. So from that point of view, I'm okay. And then plan B in terms of temporary residency, permanent residency, second passport. Now's the time because, at the moment I would imagine, and I hate to say this, I imagine with imminent war, although people will argue we've already started one, got a feeling it's going to get, a bit worse moving on. Government turn around and conscript everyone because they can, and you haven't got plan B, you're screwed. Now, what are the odds of that happening? I don't know. It could. When it comes to government, we should never, whatever country you're in, you shouldn't rule anything out. So, at the moment, it's a bit of a mess.
Mhm. Well, this concept of having a plan B basically to me applies to not only, let's say, residency, but also our finances, our money, even where we're going to live, right? And I love this, in a way, this framework of thinking about everything as a plan B. Again, from financial to, let's say, logistical standpoint. But I'd like to drill down a little bit more on the free speech issue that you guys are facing right now. Like, I'm sure some of our listeners have seen the video of the police showing up in somebody's house and basically telling them that they're under arrest for a Facebook post that they made. Is this, like, do you know anybody that has actually been directly affected by this? And do you think that obviously this is something that is only getting started, this Orwellian way of dealing with, anything that's said on the internet?
So first answer is I don't know anyone that's been directly affected by that. I don't know anyone off the top of my head that has been arrested by the popo, or whatever phrase you want to use from the police. Going to the Orwellian factor, I mean, it's going to get worse. I mean, it is, because how do you then define hate speech? How do you define all this sort of stuff? And I think that what we have an issue with I'm going to use the United Kingdom, I think, as a whole, although actually Scotland already has a hate crime speech bill in place. Funnily enough, that got introduced. The next thing you know, the Scottish minister, as it Humza Yousaf or something along those lines, he was ousted from his role because the police were spending more time chasing up hate speech in Scotland than actually dealing with crime. So I can look at this south of the border, being in England, and say that it's not worked in Scotland, so they're not exactly the shining example to follow here. It's going to get worse because we all have this. It's almost like a fear of being perceived or portrayed as being racist, because anything we seem to want to do could easily be construed as racist. Mm-hmm. And then that leads to a whole different ballgame, because then that gets into, well, how have we got to this situation where, we've allowed X amount of people in, or what's been the border policies in the last, 15, 20 years. And also then you have to look at the history of the British Empire as well. And then people could argue, well, what, slave trade this or colonization that, and then, what do you expect? I mean, again, we could probably go on for hours about that. But we're seeing now that if you can post something on Facebook or X or whatever platform you're on, and it is deemed as offensive, number one, I'm sure the police have got better things to do with their time, to be honest with you. Maybe let's look at all the knife crime. Let's look at stopping people like Just Stop Oil and all that sort of, mumbo jumbo. Maybe they should stop, and look at dealing with that rather than, Dave from Stockport posting something that's deemed offensive that might not have been offensive. Mm-hmm. So we're on a slippery slope, but the problem is we're on that slippery slope. And once you're on it, it's very difficult to get off, and they're creating a rod for their own back because, you get into this whole debate of, what is offensive, because what you might construe as being offensive, I might not. There are going to be things out there that are generally, most people could look at and go, well, yeah, that's a bit inappropriate. But then, it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous there, Tom, man. Hopefully that answers that question. It's going to get a lot worse, I think, before it gets better.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the idea that you brought up at the beginning, this kind of bifurcation of the justice system, where it seems like there are harsher penalties for some people, and yet on the other side, it doesn't seem that way. I think that's a big example, and it's very telling of how the system is going as well. So, Rob, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, what are you doing about this, and where are you going? When we think about that plan B and taking action upon that idea, how do you think about that?
Well, plan B is important. Definitely. You have to have one. And the example I love to give people is where we live in Brighton at the moment with my housemate. Once a week, we'll go and do some food shopping, and there is there is method to the madness here. And we will normally say something along the lines of, "Here's the food list. Okay, let's go and get X, Y, and Z. Oh, by the way, what if the supermarket doesn't have this? What's plan B? What's plan B for dinner? Oh, okay, plan B. Well, let's have this meal instead of that meal." Mm-hmm. Now, if you could come up with plan B for your food, as in what you're going to have for dinner tonight, then you should be thinking about plan B in a more macro and strategic geopolitical level of, well, if I can decide I've got two options for dinner, then maybe I might need a couple of options just in case I need to get out of where I am at the moment. So for myself, I'm lucky to an extent that I've got temporary residency in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So whenever I go back there, which I will do at some point, that is my plan B, to go and actually live with my wife. My wife is Mexican. My plan B's in place. Now I can get on a plane, land in Mexico, and unless I do something drastically wrong, they're probably not going to be able to get rid of me. So if anyone's listening to this from the Mexican government, please don't get rid of me when I turn up. That would be nice. But I've got that in place. So if for any reason a physical war kicks off, and we're talking anything to do with the Middle East or the big bad Russians, as we like to label them here in the UK, then if it all kicks off and our current government, who can apparently put you in jail for saying stuff on Facebook, decide to conscript everyone and say, okay, everyone between the ages of, 18 to 65, you're conscripted. If you're able-bodied, you're conscripted. This is going to start on Monday. I'm booking a flight quicker than you can say anything, and I'm getting out of it because I can. I can just turn up and go, thanks very much, see you later, I'm done. Now, I hope, sincerely, it will never come to that, to be honest with you. My plans are already in place. I'd like to go and explore a bit more of the world. I like those things, getting out and about and doing this. But there are going to be people that are going to be, with the short end of the stick. And again, I go back to the point at the start. It's very dark when you can plan two things for dinner, just again, very, nonchalantly or something along those lines. But you don't even think about it. It's like plan A, plan B, great. But then when it comes to, well, should I leave my country, or if something bad happens, then, what am I going to do to get out of it? And people just most people haven't thought about it. I'd imagine most people that listen to Palisades Gold Radio are clued in with this stuff. But there's going to be millions and billions of people out there that just haven't thought about it, to be honest. And that worries me, because we should always have options available.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that I did want to talk to you, Rob, is, granted, we're talking to a biased audience here. However, talking to somebody that is actually going through this, that is actually, motivated and is making this happen, making this change happen, I think is a good example and something that takes a little bit of the, let's say, the fear or the cloak off of actually doing something about this and moving somewhere else if you are not happy with your current circumstances. I think it's very important to be treated well as somebody with, productive capacity in the world. And I think the idea that capital and, brain power in a way goes to where it is valued most, I think that does end up still being a very important force in this world. Rob, when we're thinking about these, let's say, motivations for you to move, if we take some of the energy policies, for example, in the UK, do you see many of these policies as being advanced by the governments in the world as exacerbating costs and inflation at this point?
Energy policies, Western Europe, UK, Tom, it's all nonsense. I mean, and that's me being diplomatic about it. It's just absolutely crazy. We are, and again, whether all these people are controlled by Club of Rome and World Economic Forum and that sort of stuff. I won't go into that. That's a whole different conversation. Energy policies at the moment are nonsensical. It doesn't add up. Now, we're in a bit of an odd place as United Kingdom, because geographically, we've been quite fortunate over our lifetimes. In fact, over the course of history in our island or islands, we're surrounded by the English Channel and the North Sea. The couple of times people have come over and tried to invade us, anyone will tell you about 1066 Hastings and glorious revolution of 1688 and what could have happened in World War II but didn't happen, or the Spanish Armada in 1588, all that sort of stuff. We're quite lucky that we're surrounded by what we're surrounded by. But that does mean that energy-wise, especially in modern day, that we're quite reliant on importing quite a lot. Now, I'm not just going to lay this all at the current government, because that's not a fair thing to do. I think we've got to lay this, I think, with any government in the last 15, 20 years, give or take. So when I say government, I'm going to use it generically, but let's refer to 20 years or more. Things that we haven't done that we should have done. Nuclear, which is the answer, by the way, for your baseload energy. So baseload energy would normally be some form of nuclear, oil, coal, and gas. Now, with oil, gas, and coal, with all this, eco-warrior, eco-zealot nonsense going on, people need to be, or want to be greener, greener and meaner, fine, and cleaner. Now, I'm all up for that to an extent, but you don't just flick your finger and it transfer overnight. These things will take time. Now, the answer to that is nuclear. Right, that's fine. How do you get there? Well, when you've got a bunch of these people in charge that don't seem to know what the answer is, well, they think the answer is wind and solar. And again, given our geography, we're quite primed for some wind turbines, and the North Sea can get quite blustery, so we can produce quite a lot of wind. Fine. Anyone that's been to the UK knows that the sun comes out for about 6 hours a year. I'm not sure the solar stuff's gonna. I've been a bit facetious there, but solar in comparison to say, Nevada, not as prominent. But certainly the wind factor, yes. But wind and solar aren't baseload energy. Your baseload, you need nuclear. So when I read stories about governments stopping oil licenses and gas licenses for drilling off of the North Sea in Scotland, just off the coast there, in Aberdeen's very famous for it, that's going to destroy that city quite quickly, because that's most of the workforce up there. But when the governments stop that, we can't even get nuclear plants over the line because of some of the insane planning rules and regulations that we've got. And of course, it always takes one person to complain about it. And then, the NIMBYs, as we call them, not in my backyard. We had a scenario of EDF wanted to build a big nuclear plant in Somerset, southwest England. And this was, I want to say 10 years ago, maybe 2016. And they'd agreed £16 billion, which sounds like a lot of cash if you ask me. They had everything in place. Any cost overruns, anything like that, they'd be financed by EDF. They're a French energy company. Not a problem. This sounds great. Of course, people started complaining. Well, I don't want nuclear here, and it's going to, ruin when I take my dog out for a walk, and nuclear's scary and all that sort of stuff. Then the last few years have happened. You don't need to go into that. And then all of a sudden, the contract's worth £28 billion, and the UK taxpayer's on the hook for any overruns. But I just wonder why sometimes I wonder how we get anything done in this country. Trying to go off of my rant there. So what we're doing at the moment is we're not renewing or giving out new oil and gas licenses. We still import a lot of our oil and gas because just of where we are geographically, it is what it is. But then we're also not looking at what proper baseload energy is and what the most sensible and I think sustainable baseload energy will be, which is nuclear. But we're still anti, coal, anti-oil, anti-gas. And then all of a sudden, subsidies. Let's look at wind turbines. Let's look at heat pumps. Let's look at solar. That's just not going to solve the issue. If you're going to get energy independence and energy security, then nuclear, you've got to go down that route. Leaning on from that, though, Tom, we've got some of the highest energy bills in the world. And when various governments are printing currency galore because they're handing out all these subsidies to all these energy companies who, explore building wind turbines, it sounds like it's okay, but that just gets added to the consumer. So we wonder why our energy cost per unit has been going up significantly. Doesn't help when your government decides that they don't want to import fuel from Russia because we don't like the Russians for some reason. Don't get me started on that. And then we've got a thing called a standing charge, which you get charged for per day for just the benefit of having gas and or electricity connected to your home. So you've got to pay it nonetheless. And that's the thing that I think irks a lot of people, that they're seeing all of this. And I think most people haven't put the dots together. But I've got a feeling people are starting to wake up and smell the coffee and are going, hang on a minute. This isn't making much sense here. But again, we're almost so far down that road now that it's a bit bonkers. So part of my plan B, moving away, is to significantly lower my cost of living. Because why not? I think if you've got the ability to do so, do so. But in answer to your question, energy policies, put in place by the last government, not good. They look like they're going to be continued by the current government. And that's not going to be good either. And I only wish and hope that more people can start to put two and two together and make four and see what's happening.
Well, I mean, exactly in that vein that you just said, I wish, more people could start putting two and two together. Why do you think, what incentives are in place that come to mind for you that have created this place that we've come to where the eco-zealots, as you have called them, think that solar and wind are the only ways to move forward with this problem and not nuclear?
It's a good question. I think it comes down to knowledge. I think when people hear nuclear, people think Chernobyl, which I've been to, by the way, and that is a really screwed up place. So, I've seen it with my own eyes. It's a very bizarre place, and Pripyat, the town, very, very strange, very surreal. One of the most surreal trips I think I've ever done in my life. But people will think Chernobyl, people will think possibly Fukushima, and people will just put two and two together and think nuclear equals dangerous. When actually, with the right education and understanding, whether it's nuclear, oil, gas, whatever, none of it's perfect. It will all have its pros and cons. I think it comes down to education, possibly just a lack of education, and that's not necessarily amongst the citizens. That's possibly from the people higher up in charge that have got the ability to make these decisions. Of course, big government, big business. I would well imagine that a few envelopes have exchanged hands when it comes to subsidies and who can build what where, and we've got to do this for the the benefit of our shareholders and stuff like that. That's probably going to go ahead somewhere. But I would imagine a lot of it, Tom, comes down to just education, that people actually might not understand that nuclear is the answer, and that we can be in control of our own destiny if we have a nuclear baseload energy in the UK. I mean, that goes for any country, to be fair. That's what I would put it down to be honest.
Well, I think a big piece of that educational piece, as you're saying, can also come down to understanding the subsidies. If we looked at, tried to organize, let's say, each energy system objectively by looking at it X subsidies, I think that would go a long way to try to understand how these systems are actually working and what their output actually ends up being, and what the cost of them ends up being as well, right?
Yes, if mainstream media want to report that. Because when you're so far down the route of this is the answer, what's the question?
Mhm.
You will, as we're seeing with free speech and, various forms of content left or right, if you've got control of the media or you've got control of the narrative, you can start just pushing that how you want to push it. I agree with you. I think that having clarity on that would make a lot of sense, would be a lot more beneficial to a lot more people. I saw an article actually this afternoon before we started recording, and we've got an energy company called Octopus Energy, and they have pledged to continue the giving out the winter fuel allowance. So basically, if you're an old age pensioner and you've got fuel issues because of how high they are because of policy mistakes we've made, the government can help you. Current government, because they're trying to tighten the belt a little bit, have said this might drop down a bit this year. Octopus Energy have turned up and said, yeah, hang on a minute, we might be in a position to help. Well, my argument there is, I think it was £30 million. So, you're not really going to find that down the back of a sofa anytime soon. If you've got £30 million as an energy company in your bank account, surely, number one, could you then actually lower your unit cost to benefit more people and to rid any people of fuel poverty? Secondly, if you haven't got it down the back of a sofa and you're asking the government and or Bank of England to print it, that's inflationary, and that's going to come back to you anyway through higher bills to people. That to me doesn't make sense at all. It doesn't make sense at all. But I think, again, when you are getting dictated, it's things like you will own nothing and be happy, and we must be cleaner, we must be greener, we must be, so eco-friendly that we must be scared of oil and scared of gas and scared of coal, and it must be wind and it must be solar, without understanding that although they will have a place, they're not going to run the country. Mm-hmm. Tom, in 2024, and England reached the European Championship football final. In major tournaments, when England are playing, we are still given a warning for everyone not to turn their kettle on at half time to make a cup of tea because we could trip out the grid. It's 2024. That shouldn't be happening in this country. It's madness. And that shows to you that actually we don't have the grid infrastructure. And we need to improve on that. If we've got more EVs coming along, we've got more wind energy, we've got more solar energy, that sort of stuff. No one, as far as I can see in my research, has actually said, you know what, we need to sort the grid out here. We need to sort the national grid out. Now, again, I appreciate that there are plans in place, I believe, to look at starting that. But again, looking to start it and actually starting it are two different things. And if you ever want a project to cost too much and be overrun and get done badly, the UK is the place to get it done, because we will charge more, it will not get done, or when it gets done, everyone will moan about it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, that's incredible. And, it's a perfect example of this cognitive dissonance that is so prevalent in this world right now. I remember last summer, California, for example, is going headlong into the EV thing. They want everybody in EVs by, I think, 2030, something like that. And yet the following week, they're saying, don't turn your air conditioners on because we're going to have rolling brownouts. And it's just, how do we continue down this path of demanding more and more from the grid, and yet seeing the actual manifestation of not having a grid that can support that much energy output or electrical output? It just doesn't make sense. But yet we're still moving in that direction, or many people are. Right? Obviously, I can't say everybody is. Obviously, shows like this are a big piece of that educational puzzle to help people understand, hopefully from a bit more of an objective standpoint, what some of these problems are. But, it seems to me, Rob, that we're prone to really repeating a lot of these mistakes as society. So if you could tell us what monetary history teaches us about what money is, and, if we're basically doomed to keep repeating these boom bust cycles if we don't learn from them.
Where to start with that? that's a fully loaded question there, Tom. I love it. I absolutely love it. We're at the moment, I think we're living quite dangerously financially. And I know that a lot of people will note the US and they'll look at the budget the deficit that they have. I actually don't know what the figures are for the UK because, again, I think we're leaving the UK in due course. I'm not really keeping too many tabs on that, to be honest. I just want to be transparent there with the listeners. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't give you UK figures off the top of my head. We've seen it all before. Inflation, you get your hyperinflation as a result. You get people, you've had people on the show before talk who lived through the 70s. And I speak to my parents, every now and then and ask them what that was like in the 70s. And that was a bit crazy. You get your pay packet, go and buy a bunch of stuff because you could pretty much guarantee it had gone up, the following day or next week. Inflation comes in waves and people the people in charge, the people in power, they either know that and they won't do anything about it, or they'll just do all the wrong things till they come to the right solution. In that way, that's just criminal and just being thick. Or they are just clueless. I'd love to be able to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I think it's probably the former. I do think they're engineering things. But anyway, given the history, we've seen it before. Things like the Roman Empire have fallen down. Again, they were, when they start chipping away quite literally at their gold and silver, you get Diocletian, famous Book of Edicts. That empire came crashing down. That was a monetary issue predominantly. Then Rome getting destroyed by the Visigoths, but it's not a history podcast, so let's not go into that. We look at then gold standard, 19th century. Again, do your reading about that. You find that there's certainly in most of Europe, that seemed to be a decent time. Wars going on here and there, but pegged to gold standard. We then came off. Winston Churchill then probably made one of the biggest mistakes of his life. I think he failed to value gold properly, I think, in the 20th century at some point, and then it all went belly up from there. All these mistakes have been made before, but because we're repeating the same mistakes, I think then it's important, rather than just come across with someone that's just moaning about it, number one, it's important to study it. That's what I will say. If you don't know much about it, there's plenty of books out there. You can see for people watching this, I do a lot of reading. There's a lot of books behind me, and it's all history and all sorts of stuff because the information's there about what's happened before. Mm-hmm. If it's happened before, the chances are it's going to either happen again or it's going to, history doesn't repeat itself. It rhymes. I forget who said that. It might have been Mark Twain, possibly. This stuff's out there. This information's out there. This knowledge is out there. So at the moment, what we're seeing is that there's a lot of inflationary policies out there. Now, a lot of them have come as a result of things that happened at the end of 2019, 2020 and beyond. We've just touched upon it in terms of energy subsidies. It's not just here in the UK that they're going a bit bonkers. I believe the same thing's happening in the USA as well. They're clever enough to come out with the Inflation Reduction Act, which involves spending. You can't make this stuff up, Tom. You just really can't. So if I ever need to feel better about myself, I just look at what's happening in the USA because that sounds like a bit more of a horror show than over here. Point being, there's a lot of information out there, but there's always solutions. And I think for people that, what I'm just about to say, I'm not an independent financial advisor, I'm not an IFA, please don't take this as advice, we're just having a friendly conversation about what things that you might want to look at. Look at gold, look at silver. You have to. The key difference is that, yes, one is more of an industrial metal, silver, we get that. Gold has stood the test of time. It just has. It's got, 5,000 maybe years of history, give or take. It's got a 5,000-year history, good track record. Gold and silver, they're money. The big difference between money and currency, money is a store of value. Every currency has gone to zero at some point. It's got 100% success record, fiat currencies. Why it's a currency. Money, gold, silver holds its value. yes, okay, the markets can be manipulated paper-wise, yeah, etc. Yes, that can happen. It does happen, but there are always solutions. And so, if you are in a position where you do not own any bullion, I would suggest that in your spare time, you do some reading about gold and silver, and you come to your own conclusions. And I would hope that that conclusion might entail the purchase of said bullion, because again, there will always be a multitude of reasons why you would own bullion, and those reasons have got to mean something to you. So for myself, it's protecting myself against stupid people. My wife laughs every time I say that, but it's true. I want to protect myself, herself, our family, and other family. I want to be able to protect ourselves against stupid people that come up with stupid ideas and stupid policies. Now, yeah, and I like being, hence, contrarian capitalist. I just like being different, to be honest, because normally, even if I haven't got my tinfoil hat on, I normally find most of the time those people that are labeled as conspiracy theorists and whatever, and yeah, normally we're right, and I like being right. Sounds big-headed, I know, but I like being on the right side. At the end of the day, with massive wealth transfers that are going to happen, we might see a new BRICS currency at some point that may be pegged to gold. Why do you think all these central banks are buying up loads of gold? If that gets pegged, or if the USA or whomever decides to do an accounting practice and revalue their gold in order to correlate it to the national debt, I have seen all sorts of figures online about what that value could be. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that's the reason I've purchased bullion, but it's one of the reasons, but it's very low on the list. I haven't done it in the hope. I haven't done it in, oh my God, I hope it happens and whatever. But if it does happen, and that does get valued to, I don't know, 5 figures. I have even read someone say 6 figures, whatever. Mm-hmm. That happens, I might just cash in and then go into a different asset class. I don't know. That may never happen. But again, going back to your questions, I appreciate I've gone a bit off topic there, is history is there for a reason. There's a lot of monetary history to go through. And no matter, I'm sure there'll be lessons, no matter what country you live in the world and where you're listening to this, there will be lessons that you can take from it. And from the lessons, there will always be solutions. And again, I'm not an independent financial advisor. Do not take this as advice. I would strongly suggest you look at gold and silver because they are true money and, well, they're not going to die. That being said, even the Royal Mint, who produce our Britannia coins over in the UK, by the way, if you are in the UK and do look at purchasing bullion, I've just done a podcast series on that. Check that out because we've got some great tax benefits if you buy the right coins here in the UK. As a UK citizen, I must add, we've got some great tax benefits. To go and check that out. It's there for a reason. I mean, it can help protect you. But again, do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and hopefully that helps.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I love this idea of really creating a holistic or, an entire ecosystem of plan B, of alternatives, of not putting your eggs all in one basket. If, you're only exposed to one currency, you get into, not that I'm saying that this is a risk that I see right away, but, I'm sure there are people that wish that they didn't have Deutschmarks at particular times in history. There's so many examples of this, and really having these, again, these plan Bs of all types is really important. You mentioned that you're, a property manager or managing a property company. Do you see property and real estate as another piece of that plan B framework?
100%. I think that's important. I think there's always ways to get on the ladder, and there's a whole different ways of doing that. I think that having the physical bricks and mortar is useful. To be fair, even if you didn't have the physical bricks and mortar and it was land is valuable. Land is very, very useful. But yeah, my business partner and I, we started in property back in 2016, I think it was. We had been traveling and we were discussing, how can we keep traveling and, what can we do to provide passive income to then enable the time freedom, which is really the most important thing, the time freedom, to then go out and about and explore more of the world. And we decided property was the answer. We continue to do stuff to this day. Admittedly, it is mostly my business partner who deals with that side, to be fair. But again, with plan B and moving to Mexico at some point, I can then possibly start looking at that over there, which would be useful. But yeah, property is a very good thing. It's done right, because there's a million ways you can do it wrong, but done right, yeah, it's very useful. And again, if you are borrowing X amount today, with the rate of inflation, what we're told and what it is are two different things, but inflation will erode away the debt on that property. So actually, from a long-term asset point of view, it's great. It's absolutely fantastic. But again, it's one of those, you've got to know why you're doing it. It can be very useful to build up a base of good passive income and good solid passive income, absolutely. But also, if you're thinking generations ahead, or can I leave this to family, or can I leave this to X, Y, and Z? Yeah, look after it and it will look after you, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So Rob, you mentioned, doing it properly. Are there, let's say, a handful of things that you think are important to buying it properly? And do you look at buying property along with, let's say, this credit cycle or the interest rate cycle, when things are, let's say, more fairly valued versus being more, as a rule, almost overpriced?
I know there's a lot of people in our network, in our property network, who are sitting on cash because the whole house of cards will come down and it will probably be commercial. Just as I know that people that you've had before have said the same thing in places like San Francisco, the USA, etc. I think the same thing will happen here. And so, yeah, there's people in our network that are sat on cash because when that happens and they can just walk in and snap up pennies on the pound or whatever it might be, they're going to get a good deal. In terms of interest rates and whatnot, the average interest rate from the Bank of England since 1694, since when it was incepted, is 5%. So we're actually at 5% at the time of recording. So it's no different. It's just the average. I think even when we started, when the rates are quite low, I think you can become accustomed to that. But at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. If the yield on that property is higher than, if it's higher than the rate of inflation, or if it yields more, if the yield you get from it is higher than the rate of inflation, then you're already winning. If it just provides cash flow at the same time, it doesn't bother me if it's a property's worth £1 million or £1. If it's going to generate positive cash flow per month, then that's fine by me. But it's also about, if you've got mortgages, managing the mortgages properly. So working with your mortgage broker and trying to time it right. We're still on our cheap rates because back in 2019, 2020, when things started going a bit wrong, I said to my business partner, we've got to fix these, long term, because this is what will probably happen. And it has. So, but yeah, in average, again, we're at 5% rate, Tom. That's been the average rate since 1694 at the Bank of England. So yeah, it's nothing new. You always make currency, but money is the normal phrase. You always make your money when you buy. And we know a lot of people that are sat on a lot of cash because they can see some rumblings, and if they can see what's happening, so can we.
Rob, you mentioned the interest rates, and as of course we've seen many of the governments around the world, I guess with the exception of Japan and the US, many of these governments are starting to cut rates. Does this move show you really the fragility of the markets right now versus actually seeing that inflation has been brought back down into their target range?
I think with that, again, just from studying the 70s, we're going back to what we're talking about history, where we can look at monetary policy. Again, all these charts are here for people to see. Inflation in the 70s, I think, went in 3 waves, if I'm not mistaken. So you had your first wave, it came back down. People thought that was, the end of it. And then it rocketed up again. And then the same thing happened. And then people poking their nose into other people's oil, and then it all kicked off. I think the same is going to happen again. I think that lowering the interest rates is a bad thing. It takes, 18 to 24 months for interest rate changes to really work its way through the financial plumbing of an economy. So I think that although it might sound good, I'm sure it'll come back to bite everyone on the backside. That's I haven't gone ridiculously deep into that. Again, I'm just looking at the 70s and, well, if it happened then, people like making the same mistakes, because it seems like people like making the same mistakes. I would imagine that's what's going to happen this time as well. The other caveat on that, though, Tom, which is a scary thought, I'm sure that people listening will agree, is that maybe it's being done on purpose because governments know that the only way that they can get themselves out of the trouble that they've created in the last 4 or 5 years is to go to war, because war is inflationary and could destroy the whole system. And then you have a reset. Now, there's a part of me that hates to think about that, because, that's just all sorts of wrong, to be honest. But then the other part of me says, well, it's happened before, so it could happen again. So that's probably a bit of a dark thought there, but it's important to be truthful and share that with people and add value.
Absolutely. So, Rob, why don't we kind of wrap up by talking a little bit about, or just skimming over again, what the actual solutions are that you're focused on. You said to me before we started recording here today that you're more focused on actually acting and thinking about solutions rather than just pissing and moaning, as you put it, about the problems.
You make me sound so elegant, Tom. I love it. It's absolutely brilliant.
Well, we both know, and I'm sure we all know people that just, they're more focused on the problems and they're whining about the problems rather than actually doing something about it.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think that's where the true value, I think, gets added for sure. And yeah, there's plenty of things that you can start doing. You can, I would say that geopolitically, geostrategically, please look at getting a temporary residency or permanent residency or even a second passport somewhere. Now, there are many ways you can do that. You can do it through ancestry. So let's just say you're listening to this and you're in the UK. Let's just say you have an Italian grandmother, for whatever reason. Okay, it'd be nice if it was a completely different part of the world, but if you got the option to get an Italian passport, just go ahead and crack on and do it. So you can do it through ancestry. You could do it through the naturalization process. How long do you spend somewhere, et cetera, et cetera. You could do it by, I think some places you can do it by investment, and then you can do it by birth tourism. So, I think just soli, I think the birthright, whatever that means in Latin. So you can give birth somewhere. And this is something my wife and I have discussed for plans in the future, that's something that we would probably look to do, because then go to the right country. That child then becomes a citizen of that country. Mm-hmm. And then as a parent, that gives you an even better option. And depending on the country, you can actually naturalize yourself in it within a year or two. I think Brazil and Argentina at the time of recording are good for that. That's a different conversation for further on down the line. But so you could do that.
Sorry to interrupt, Rob. For anybody that wants to know more about those options and all of those options that you just mentioned, go back with my recent conversations with Mikkel Thorup from Expat Money. He's very, very well versed in all of that stuff.
I'm just about to say, you beat me to the cut there, Tom. Mikkel is fantastic at that sort of stuff. Yeah, go and check him out. So yeah, you could do it through ancestry, so you can get a second passport that way. Temporary residency, I think, again, that can be done on a multitude of ways. You can do it economically, i.e., how much are you earning? Why do you want to move here? All of that sort of stuff. Permanent, you can do straight away, depending on the country. And again, you have to remember the whole reason for this is it just giving you that second option. You can have more than that if you wanted. You could have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 options. But if you plan it properly, it's about giving you that option. So temporary residency, permanent residency, or citizenship. Again, reference back to Mikkel Thorup and Expat Money. The guy's fantastic. The team is fantastic. Check them out, and they'll give everything that you need to do. They will help you. Financially, then, what can you do? Again, if you don't know about these things. And I imagine there's not going to be many people that are listening to this that don't already have some inkling of what's going on. Again, there's plenty of books out there, plenty of podcasts, plenty of books to read. You should look at, again, not an independent financial advisor, look at bullion, look at gold, look at silver, look at the role that it's played, look at the role that it's likely to play moving forward. So you can do that. That's plan B. It gets you out of the monetary system. I said at the start, I don't know too much about Bitcoin. I know you've had people on the show before, and there are loads of people out there that advocate Bitcoin. It's got a lot of qualities. Don't know much about it, can't comment, but maybe it's something you want to look at as well. Because the more we're out of the financial system and the more options that we have, the more it's going to be beneficial for us, because it is possible that very dark things are coming ahead. And if you happen to be in the wrong part of the world and bad things happen and you do not have a get out clause, you're screwed. And some get out clauses or plan Bs, yeah, you got to do a bit of donkey work for it, but some are quite easy to obtain. I obtained my temporary residency through marriage. I will point out I do love my wife. That's the first reason why we're married. It just so happens. Second advantage is getting that plan B, and that's a wonderful card. I mean, I could turn up there, and I will turn up there at some point in the next few months, and that's my plan B in place. So yeah, it's not all doom and gloom, Tom. There's loads of places, there's loads of people out there that can help. There's loads of things that you can study, but the onus, more people need to take responsibility in the world, and by having these conversations and by taking action, we can have more responsibility. So yeah, plan B, temporary residency, permanent residency, even dual passport as well. Just have something that if the proverbial hits the fan, you can then react quite quickly to that and move out quite quickly. Even with your bullion as well, you can store that in all sorts of places around the world. Store it in your house. Do whatever you need to do with it. Understand why you're doing it, because again, if there are bail-ins, they could be bail-ins, happening in Cyprus and whatnot. They could be bail-ins. There could be financial collapses where there's a long ongoing bank holiday. So if all your banking's online and you're not able to withdraw anything or move anything around, but you're sat there and you've got some bullion in your back pocket, well, that's liquidity. I mean, that's as liquid as I think you're going to get. Bullion people will take that. So again, it's having that. If it's having that plan B. You can have plan B for dinner. You can have plan B for moving country.
100%. And I think a lot of this, that we chatted about today, again, all comes back down to education. And I think the important part about that is to try to look at both sides and then form an opinion as to how to move forward and actually take action in the world. Rob, I want to thank you for your time today. It was very, very good to be able to discuss this complete Plan B framework. Of course, all of your stuff is available at the Contrarian Capitalist Substack, contrariancapitalist.substack.com. Rob, is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with to think about before we wrap up?
As doom and gloom as I might have sounded throughout this episode, I sincerely hope that it's added value to listeners. And should the feedback be fantastic and people go, I like this guy, Tom, I hope the next time that I speak to you or we speak to each other, I'll be recording from a brand newly built house in Mexico. That would be fantastic. But really, it's about adding value. I hope people have got a lot of value from it. It'd be great to be on the show again if people love the content. And I would say for every single challenge in the world, there is always a solution. And it's upon you to be able to research that, do what's best for you, do what's best for your family, and have that plan B. And contrariancapitalist.substack.com. Head over there and it'd be great to see you over there.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Rob. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. Nothing on this podcast should be taken as investment advice. Guests on this show are not compensated for their appearance. Listeners are urged to educate themselves and make their own decisions. Do not base any investment decisions on the information contained. To view our full disclaimer, please visit our website.